Hi, this is Stephanie Lotvin of Telly Bean Knits, and today I'm going to be showing you how to work row 1, the setup row of day 6 or section 6 of the grand opening shawl. If you are working from the Suburban Stitcher Advent Calendar and you have not yet opened days 1 through 6 of your yarn, then I recommend pausing the video here. I will be showing days 1 through 6 of the yarn from the Suburban Stitcher Advent Calendar. And so I don't want to spoil it for you. Take a second, pause the video, now's the moment, and when you're ready, come back and you can work the setup row with me. Okay, I have here days 1 through 5 or sections 1 through 5 of the grand opening shawl. I'm ready for a right side row, so the right side of my work is facing me. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how we work across the beginning of the setup row. We're going to work across the first half of the setup row, and then we're going to put the second half of our stitches on hold. I'm just going to scoot my yarn to the end of my needles, and I still have my right side of my work facing me. I have here the tail of color 5, which I broke at the end of day 5, section 5. And I'm going to begin by slipping the first stitch purlwise with yarn in front. And now I'm going to bring the tail of my yarn between my needles and just drop that at the back of my work. I'm ready to join color 6. I'm going to knit 2, 1, 2. Now I'm going to slip the stitch marker and I'm going to work a yarn over. Next, I'll just be knitting to the next stitch marker. It'll be the second stitch marker. I'll be knitting to the second stitch marker. Okay, I'm coming up to my stitch marker, and in previous rows we have worked an increase right next to the stitch marker, but for this row we will not be working an increase. So there's no increase before this stitch marker, before the central stitch. We are going to remove that stitch marker. We're going to knit the central stitch, and then we are going to remove the second stitch marker. Now we are going to make one left, and we are ready for putting our stitches on hold. I have here a piece of scrap yarn on my tapestry needle ready to place my stitches on hold. I like to use scrap yarn just because it's easy. I always have it laying around. But if you prefer to use a spare knitting needle or a spare cable from one of your interchangeable needles, I completely understand. I have about 3 feet of yarn here. I'm going to slip all of the remaining stitches in this row purlwise. I don't want to change the orientation or the direction of those stitches at all. I'm just slipping every stitch onto a piece of scrap yarn. Now, when I'm choosing the length of yarn that I use for slipping stitches, I like to have enough yarn so that I can still comfortably spread out my stitches while I'm working on my shawl. And I like to have enough yarn so that I can easily tie the scrap yarn off so that there's no chance that my stitches are going to come off of that piece of scrap yarn. It's also one of the reasons I prefer scrap yarn, is because it makes it really easy to guarantee that I am not going to lose any stitches as I work the live stitches that are on my needles while some of my stitches are on hold. Now, here's a little trick for making sure that your markers can stay in place. while guaranteeing that they will not be stuck on a piece of scrap yarn, I'm actually going to remove the stitch marker that's marking my garter edge, and I'm going to replace it with a removable stitch marker. And the reason I'm doing this is because once I have that stitch marker on a piece of scrap yarn, I want to be able to keep the spot where that stitch marker was, but I'm going to want to be able to take this off and leave my scrap yarn in place later, and I'll explain that in another tutorial. But I like to have a removable marker to replace the marker that was on those needles. I'm just going to finish slipping all of those stitches. Remove my tapestry needle, and then I take the two ends of my yarn and I just tie those off. And now I can stretch out my knitting again. Bring that up a little bit. And so I currently have the first half of my stitches on my needles, and I have the rest of my stitches placed on hold. I have a removable marker on hold also with my stitches, and I currently only have one marker marking my garter edge on my live stitches. So that is how you work the setup row 1 of day 6 or section 6 of the grand opening shawl. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Thank you so much for watching.